podcast. Today's guest is a powerhouse in homelessness outreach. With over 3 decades of frontline experience, he's pioneered the pre-treatment approach, which is a trauma-informed method that connects with people long before your traditional services kick in. He's helped shape Housing First models and authored essential texts like the Pre-Treatment Guide and Pre-Treatment in Action. His work bridges US and UK practice, blending deep empathy with practical innovation. So if you care about trauma-informed care, cultural sensitivity, or designing services that actually work, for me, this is your episode and you're welcome into this environment. So without further ado, and flowers to you, welcome J.S. Levy. Welcome, Jay.
Yeah, great to be here, wherever here may be, and thanks for the invite.
Brilliant. So I'm going to hand over, first of all, over to Ashley, and we're going to explore certain themes that we've done a little bit of pre-preparation for in full transparency. So yeah, Ashley, over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Leon. I guess one of the things that I'm really interested in since working in this sector is having psychologically informed environments and the importance of not just providing support to clients to come into services and then leave, but creating an environment where they feel like that isn't the end goal, and actually it's a transition into wanting to become more independent. So I wanted to ask, what does a psychologically informed environment look like when it's co-created with people who've experienced homelessness themselves? Because I think in services, we can get into the mindset that we know what's best for clients and we design services in that manner. But actually, what does the difference look like when it's been co-created with people who have come from that backgrounds themselves?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So I think to some degree, it depends on the type of service and the type of environment. And, obviously, we're trying to create something from the ground up. We're thinking when we talk about pies, right? We're talking about the physical environment, the social environment, the psychological model that's applied to that. Relationships are at the center of the work. And I think, I know Pi really values the experience, people with lived experience being part of that. And so a big part is how do we orient folks into an environment and how we can use people, I think, with lived experience to be part of that kind of welcoming, how we're able to maybe survey the people that come in or speak to them, directly, of course, about I always ask 3 basic questions of people, kind of what's working, what's not working, is there anything different that we can be doing? So I ask that about maybe themselves and their situations. That's kind of a solution-focused approach, by the way, that frame. But you could also ask that about the environment people are in, right? Like what's working for you, what's not working. So the idea of a pie is it's always unfolding. It's always changing. It's not like you reach this magical pie status. It depends on the people you're serving and their wants and needs and their match to the environment. But then it also depends to some degree on like the mission of the program, the site, the funding. And we're really looking for this kind of match between the two. So part of it is like what's possible in any particular environment based on mission, funding, that kind of thing. And to what degree can we build it from the ground up in regard to the people we're serving? Because if the mission is to be person-centered, and I would hope it would be, then we need to hear directly from those folks. So it's really coming up with good ways to almost like if I was doing it with staff, I'd be talking about like reflective practice, taking the time with staff for them to reflect on the work. But this is what we actually need to be doing with the people that we're welcoming into the environment and picking up on what their needs and wants are. And with people who are peers, who have lived experience, we can also know a little bit of that in advance from their experiences that are being shared. We've done, when I've done outreach to certain settings, we've invited people in, from the streets, the woods, wherever people were living, to come in and tell us what would be helpful. Is there certain needs that aren't being met in the community? Can we do something better? And I remember meeting with that group, and one of the first things they brought up was about all the stuff they were carrying around every day and how restricted they were. They didn't feel a sense of being able to do things that they needed to do, whether it was to try to get to work or to volunteer somewhere or to go to a meal or to do whatever they had to do. They were restricted by wanting to keep their prized possessions, whatever they had left, which was a small amount, but they needed to keep it safe. And literally, you could see the wear and tear in terms of they were complaining about back issues and shoulder issues and, just carrying everything, or the psychological energy that it took in terms of their focus on safety for themselves, but also for their stuff. So I think the other thing is in getting to know people, there's kind of a culture that you come across in terms of people living outside, in terms of things people value. And part of it is people value their autonomy. Often people value a sense of safety, so safe environments are really important. Sometimes people really value their feet because they know that if they have issues with their feet, it's hard to get around and do things. So you want to have maybe the environment really reflect some of those needs, as well as build on that based on what people tell you and what the peer community brings to the table and can also fill you in on.
I think that's so valuable. I'm just thinking about when you're saying about people carrying stuff around and the way that we design services, we don't think of storage space because, like you said, there's a psychological attachment to the things that people have been carrying around whilst they've been moving from space to space on the street for years. And actually, we get them to come into services and we say, you've got to let go of all of that. And we don't provide any psychological support around how to gradually let go of those things. So I think, yeah, just hearing you say that made me think about the significance of having people who have lived that life being able to feed into what is important, because like I said when I asked the question, we often think as professionals that we know exactly what it is that they need, and actually we miss a lot of the little things that are super important to them that we might not think are important in that transition from street to services. So thank you so much for answering that question beautifully.
And I think another aspect of it is really connecting to people's stories, because the more you really know what the person's story is, what they value, what they value in the moment of maybe where they're living, even if it's outside or in the woods or whatever. I worked with one gentleman named Butch, and I was trying to offer him housing options and other kinds of options that I thought would be helpful. I mean, we engaged okay, the trust seemed to be there, but I didn't really understand his story or where he was coming from. So I was giving him my kind of, what I like to say, sort of my program language in terms of the offerings I could make, but I really wasn't speaking exactly to his values or where he was coming from. He later on invited me to his campsite, and he was very proud of being a survivor and like a survivalist, And when I saw the campsite, I noticed that he had engraved on a tree the name Jeremy, which was his buddy. So I asked him, who's Jeremy? And he explained to us his buddy. But then he pointed to the river, because we were right by the riverside there. And he said, you see those waters? And I said, yeah. He said, well, that's where Jeremy drowned. And then he pointed to my feet and he said, you see the ground below your feet? And I said, yeah. He said, this is holy ground. This is sacred ground. So then it really dawned on me. His sense of meaning was very much connected to his site, to his memories. It was kind of like a memorial to Jeremy. It was a place he had to take care of. It was very important to him. And I didn't really know that whole part of his story. So when I would offer housing or a service or whatever, it paled in comparison to what his duty was to taking care of that site and being there for his friend continually. So as I learned about Jeremy, and he told me the stories of them hanging out, their ups and their downs and their challenges, and being brothers in arms and sharing drink with each other and watching each other's back. As I learned all of that, not from a place of diagnosing it or trying to say, oh, you have an addiction or anything like that, but on a human level, just learning about it and appreciating this relationship. What I came to realize is I was able to ask him quite organically this question. Well, winter is coming. In New England, we get sub-zero temperatures. I'm talking Fahrenheit. We get blizzards, snow blizzards. I go, I know you've been out there last winter, Butch, and you told me you can be out there this winter and you're a survivalist and you can do it. But what would Jeremy want for you? I mean, if things got really, really bad, what would he say? If you could get in for a little while, would he be for that? And that changed our whole conversation, because it was no longer me making the offer. It was through his friends and his friend's spirit. And actually, that was a deep part of himself at this point. It also helped him to grieve, to be able to talk to me about all this and relieve some of the guilt by saying, what would Jeremy want for you? That he didn't have to be there no matter what the risk was. So it opened up a whole new level of dialogue in our relationship. So I just wanted to share that story as something that I think is, really important. Sometimes we think we know what's going on, but we really don't know the story, the context, the background, where people are coming from, their lives, what's important to them. And without that, kind of what we offer is somewhat sterile.
Yeah, I just think, just to follow up on that, and thanks for sharing what a beautiful and touching story. And I think what speaks to me is, Jay, there you've got, coming from your side, you've got the consistency piece, right? Is that you're going to go there and you're going to go there time and time again, even if it is in the woods or out off the beaten track, if you will. And then there's a time putting into that relationship. And then the one thing I think that's a really powerful tool, whether you're in outreach, inreach, or just for general learning, is that situational risk. And what I mean by that is that ability to, as you're engaged in a conversation, you're watching and you're seeing what's in the environment to give you a hint what can really lock into the narrative, because that's the key bit from that whole story. It's the narrative. It's plugging in with somebody's experience, and then from there the relationship bridge is almost built. And going back to, I suppose, Ashley's original question, I think that's the power of what some people call co-production or lived experience or co-design, is that shifting of the power dynamic, right? And from there, that creates the more, I suppose, authentic and responsive space at the back end of that. And I think, I don't know how you guys feel, Ashley and Keon, but that's something that we always say, right? Is we want to reach for that authentic point and that real point in inverted commas. Don't know what you feel about that as a sort of takeaway.
I just wanted to add one thing that stood out for me in that story, and thank you so much for sharing it, is about the power of meeting people where they're at, not where we think they should be, where they currently are at. So you were, like you said, you were speaking his language when you started exploring a different way of getting him to see something from a different perspective, rather than, as you mentioned before, having your program hat on. So yeah, I think that was my key takeaway.
I would add, and it connects with what Leon just said as well, is often because of our training, because of the perspective we're coming in, if you're a social worker, if you're a nurse, if you're a doctor, whatever it is, you're coming in with your program language and also your sense of expertise in the world. So we're fond in narrative circles. We say, people are experts on their own lives. And really, I would say it's our job to facilitate the conversation, the dialogue. Now, when I use the word dialogue, a good dialogue means there's no hierarchy to it. You're really meeting people where they're at. So the power piece that Leon mentioned, I think, is super important. I always look at as engagement. The basic rules of it for the person trying to do it is, one, understand and respect you're entering someone's world. Two, they're in charge of what I call the playground of language. So it's not, we could put some words and ideas on that playground of language or communication, but if they want to nix it, if they don't like it, if it's triggering them, if it's getting in the way of our dialogue, then we need to go by what the person is either directly letting us know or through their actions and behaviors are basically showing us that word, that idea is unwelcomed right now. It doesn't mean we can't reframe it and it can be welcomed later on, if we reframe it in a way that resonates with the person, not in a way that just resonates with our expertise in programming. So for me, the cardinal rule is we're always approaching people with a sense of awe and wonder about them and what works for them and how they're getting by. And if we have that healthy awe and wonder, we're basically saying, we want to hear about your expertise in your world. And then later on, we can introduce our expertise and we know better how to frame it and to have a dialogue about it. And then they can decide if it's something they want to utilize or not.
I think for me, what I really liked about that is I think at one point you kind of pointed out the importance of the grieving process for Butch. And I think there's something about delivering services and us knowing what the outcomes that we want are for people we're supporting, but there's a priority of need for that person as an individual. And I really like the idea of like respecting that. And that's why I'm really hearing in your story, where Butch plants his feet is important to you for one reason and important to him for a completely different reason. and the order of those priorities, Butch's priority is first. And there's a
Right.
wonderment there that I really appreciate.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. I thank Butch for it. I really, he taught me a valuable lesson. So